the cost of living doesn't have to be the way it is if people just
That's
demanded,
so true,
you know,
dude.
more
Yeah.
transparency. There's a gold mine of corruption, not just in Los Angeles, but all throughout California. Problem is that nobody cares. You're right. Like people only care when they're told to care, or they
Hmm.
only care if their friends care, but they don't
Yeah.
care when it's like directly harming you. Why is it? And the thing is, we've become so normalized of
People
just
become programmed.
accepting it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like they read it, and then it's like you said, it might have been reported on, but then it's like, hey, let's get to the next thing. I'm upset that we are paying the highest gas prices in the nation. You know, like I work with legislators, I text legislators, and the problem is that we don't really have checks and balances in California. And what I mean by that is ideally what you want in your state legislation is you want checks and balances.
Average home price in Orange County is about 1.2. In Los Angeles, it's about 907,000 or so. But the fact that most people have to make at least 200,000 or more nowadays is just insane to me. Three balls, two strikes, pressure is on. This is where we discuss real estate, property improvement, and business. Together, we'll strategize on how to win. Welcome to Full Count. Hey everyone, welcome back to Full Count Podcast. We have a special guest today. He used to be with the U.S. Coast Guard, and now he's an independent journalist. Many of you know him as Informed with Anthony, but his name is Anthony Cabassa. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey man, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I've noticed that you've just been blowing up more and more over the last like 5 years. What do you think it was that caused that trajectory or the catalyst to your career? Because you're everywhere.
Yeah, man, thank you. Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I had just to kind of rewind it a bit. I had left the military in 2017 from the Coast Guard,
Mm-hmm.
and I did 11 years there, and I ended up going back to school. And so, if you're not aware of this, if you join the military, you do get money for schooling. And
Right.
so, my plan was to get out, go back to school, get some formal education, and continue doing higher education, but also working at the same time. But my plan was to use essentially this money that I got through the military to be able to pay for basic housing. It was a little
Mm-hmm.
bit scary at that time, just because um, I had been in the military for 11 years. It's a guaranteed income every 2 weeks. You know you're going to get paid no matter what.
That's
Which
nice.
is vastly different to what it is now. I think you and I kind of talked about this a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a wife, 3 kids. I actually just
Yeah.
had my now 9-year-old. He was just born. I don't even think he was a year old, and so it was risky. But we decided to pull the trigger there. And so when I got out, I had going back to school. Kind of started looking into politics just because Donald
Mm-hmm.
Trump had just won the 2016 election. And so
Right.
everybody was talking about politics. Everybody was talking about, he was a controversial guy. Whether you like the guy or you don't like the guy, Donald Trump was just very controversial at the time.
Still is.
Heck, even now, exactly. Yeah, he
Yeah.
still is. And so I just noticed that everybody was talking about politics. And so I just started talking to some of the other college students, kind of getting their opinion. And I think that one thing that
Mm-hmm.
struck me was, obviously I'm a lot older than everybody else, right? Because I
You
had served
served.
for 11
Yeah.
years. Yeah. And so a lot of these students that I was paired up next to and going to school with, a lot of them are, brand new 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, people that were still living with their parents at home, and
Right.
and
Right.
and parents were buying everything for them, and oh yeah, they pay for my gas money. I'm like, man, that must be nice. So I think it was very unique in that their perspective. They have this, more liberal view because
Mm-hmm.
they haven't really lived life yet. And then me being a veteran, my father being a veteran, my grandfather being a veteran,
Wow.
and then
Lineage of veterans.
my mom coming to America,
Mm-hmm.
to seek that American dream. I just had like this deep passion and love for America, especially for my time in service. And so
Sure.
I started getting into politics, and I thought it was interesting because you got to debate with people. You kind of, I think politics kind of allows you to kind of get to know people better. Why is it
Mm-hmm.
that you believe what you believe? It's like the old saying that says, if you're gonna be friends with anybody, there's two things you don't talk about:
Right.
politics and religion. Right.
Right.
But I think that those are the two most important things you can talk about with people, especially if you want to get to kind of know them,
Yeah,
you know?
they say everyone carries a mask. I think you're right. When you get to know their political stand, that's when the mask gets removed.
And I think that the reason for that is because you can't just say what you believe, you have to back it. You have to say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, but why do you believe those things,
Right,
right?
right.
And so that's what I found myself is I kind of found myself in this kind of like echo chamber of what people
Mm-hmm.
believed, but then they
Mm-hmm.
couldn't really back it. They just said, well, that's just what my parents say, or that's
Yeah.
just what my friends like this person, so therefore I like this person, or oh, my friends hate this person, and so therefore I hate this person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really got heavily involved in kind of like journalism, podcasting. I started listening to people like Ben Shapiro, who I found to be, highly intellectual, especially when
Mm-hmm.
it came to like debating and stuff like that.
Right.
He's really good about his famous quote that says, facts don't care about your feelings. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, I'm not here to appease to your emotions. I'm here to challenge you intellectually, and you must debate me, and you must win that debate in order for me to kind of change my belief system. And that's what I like, right? Is that's what really attracted me to the side of politics. And so
Mm-hmm.
with journalism, I decided to kind of go into journalism more so than kind of like commentary, because with journalism, I found it a lot easier to just be able to report the facts and then let people decide for themselves,
Yeah,
okay, what do
yeah.
I think about this story?
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember that when I was in class, I was taking my prereqs, and when I graduated all my prereq classes, I had to do like a thesis statement. And I remember that in that search for my thesis statement, it was essentially about like fake propaganda, fake news, the mainstream media. It was really
Mm-hmm.
more into like the journalistic integrity part of things, which is funny because it was a nursing school, right? It wasn't like a journalism class,
Okay, okay, got it. Yeah.
but somehow I found like a passion for just telling the truth. And so I remember that
Mm-hmm.
when I was studying for this thesis statement, I was reading that a little bit more than 33% of Americans would share a headline without even reading the article. So basically, if
Damn,
the
that's a lot.
headline
Yeah.
said something that I liked or I
Mm-hmm.
agreed with,
Mm-hmm.
I share it as undeniable fact.
Right,
And the
right.
article could say something completely different, because the headline could just be an opinion,
Mm-hmm.
or it could be like a clickbait hook,
Yeah, it's
you know?
just to get your attention only.
Exactly. And so, yeah, with journalism, the thing that specifically I think propelled me, fast forward a little bit, is
Mm-hmm.
when I was covering the George Floyd riots that were
Yeah,
happening, all the
that's right. That's
protests.
right.
I think that that's what really blew up my socials, because obviously for so long people had been already indoors, and then here comes like this nationwide protest over a racial conflict,
Mm-hmm.
and the mainstream media was propping it up. I was like, hey, this is a massive, massive story, and it
Right.
didn't just go nationwide, but it went global. There were protests happening around the world because
Sure.
of the George Floyd riots and stuff. Because people were kind of likening it to just police brutality in general, etc.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I just remember that I went out there with just my cell phone, and I was just recording. I wasn't doing any political commentary. I wasn't out there adding in my 2 cents. I just went
You
out to
were
these protests that would turn into riots, hit
right.
record, and then people could see for
So
themselves
straight up
what was
documenting.
happening. Just straight up documenting. Exactly. And so I just remember that around that time, I maybe had like 20,000 followers, and I
Uh-huh.
was just quickly like at 100,000 within like a few months, just
Wow.
because I was just out there hitting the
Right.
record button, and I was able to attract people of all political aisles,
Mm-hmm.
because they're like, hey, we really enjoy that you're not out there, talking about left versus right, or these people are evil, whatever. You just hit record, and then you allow people to
Right.
just kind of make an informed decision.
Getting that
So
raw footage is probably everything, I imagine. But what about
yeah.
the pressure and the sketchiness of it all, especially at the riot and other places you go to? Isn't that like a ton of pressure you got on you that you're holding it down by yourself? I mean, how do you get through that?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of people that don't like to be filmed doing bad things.
Yeah, man.
Uh,
Yeah.
who knew, right? That if you were up to no good, you don't want any evidence of it.
Yeah.
I would say that most of my coverage was rather straightforward. It was,
Mm-hmm.
here I am at
Mm-hmm.
this protest. These people are holding signs. They're sharing their political views and their thoughts on this case that was ongoing,
Right.
obviously. But then the sun went down, and things began to happen after sundown. You had a lot of opportunists, a lot of people that would show up only at dark with masks on, to
Damn. Yeah.
basically misbehave and to kind of go out there and loot and mostly peaceful riot,
Mm-hmm.
and burning down basically cities across the nation. And so it was difficult because there were a lot of times where you had a lot of these people that saw me recording and they're like, hey, you need to stop recording. And it got to the point where I could no longer, have like my journalist credentials out. There was a time like
Mm.
I have press, yeah, like tags on just about everything. Um, to identify to others that like, hey, I am a member of the press, but also to law enforcement because I'm not out there looking like a journalist. I'm not out there with like a blazer and a microphone
Yeah, how
because
do you
it's
look when you're out
yeah,
there?
I just blend in with everybody else because I go out there in sneakers,
Ah,
jeans, and a regular shirt,
sure.
and
Yeah.
so I could easily be identified as, hey, you're just a member of people, right? So this was what was called kind of like guerrilla warfare journalism in the sense that you're not out there with a camera crew. You don't have a cameraman with the perfect signal and you're waiting to get patched in and they're giving you notes over your ear. I'm just out there with just my cell phone pointing and recording, and then I
Yeah.
have to post everything myself and I have to be running around getting different angles. I had my photo camera with me as well, just taking pictures of everything. I mean, I've got hundreds of gigabytes worth of just footage and photos of
That's
the
insane.
years long
Yeah.
protest. Yeah,
How
it
do
was
you
wild.
stay objective though through all this? Because this is it's easy to go one side immediately.
Yeah. Well, I think that as cliche as it might sound, because I am a Christian man,
Mm-hmm.
I always believe in the truth. The truth has no political side. Like the
Mm-hmm.
truth is not liberal or conservative. It's not Democrat or Republican.
Right.
I live by a very simple motto when it comes to my journalism, and that's John chapter 8 verse 32. And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you
Right.
free.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And what that means essentially is like, look, I'm not here to sway you one way or the other. I do have opinion pieces that I write about on my Substack. I also have some political commentary that I do from time to time. I've got a
Mm-hmm.
couple YouTube videos over on my YouTube where, yeah, people want to ask me questions, personal questions about my personal views on one thing or the other. And so, when it comes to my reporting, however, I try to remain as objective as I can.
That's
One
great.
perfect example of this is
Mm-hmm.
when I was out there with the George Floyd riots. I would just say, for example, if some protesters just broke into a Nike store and were stealing Nike shoes, this actually did happen, by the way.
A
Um,
lot.
I
Yeah.
I would just label the video, you know, George Floyd protesters or protesters during a George Floyd protest just broke into a Nike store at this location and have
Mm,
begun looting. Now, there are other journalists that are a lot more conservative saying,
right.
like, oh, domestic terrorists, have just began looting, or they would say, oh, m- communist Marxists have just broken into. You
Yeah.
have no idea
That
what the
headline.
identity of these people are. You
Mm-hmm.
don't know,
Mm-hmm.
because here's the reality. I witnessed people that did not care for politics, like I said earlier in your podcast. These are
Yeah.
opportunists. These are people that show up. They don't care about the politics. They don't care what's happening. They see an opportunity to be able to vandalize and loot, and that's exactly what they're going to do. There's no politics to them. They probably don't even care about George Floyd. They just see a large crowd in which they can kind of blend in,
Mm-hmm.
pop out, rob a place, and then come back into the large crowd so that the police can't catch them. And I saw this all the time. And so I'm going to label things correctly. Now, some people would argue with me, that I was being too nice to these people because they would say, Anthony, that this is a left wing thing. It doesn't matter. They are
Mm-hmm.
protesters. They showed up, and I'm going to call things the way they are. And what I've found in doing that is that I have had people of all walks of life, atheists, Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, left wing, right wing, white, black, Asian, doesn't matter. These people follow me. And they follow me because
That's
they
good.
they they like my objective reporting. And I say that not because I think it's objective, it's because they tell me.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect example. I was out in the Inland Empire here in California, and I was visiting some family, and we went to a Middle Eastern store. I kid you not. It was like a Middle Eastern store that sold a lot of Middle Eastern food. My on my dad's side of the family were Europe, kind of like more European, and then my aunt ended up marrying a Greek, And so they buy a lot of Middle Eastern food or Mediterranean food, etc. And there's specific things that they can only get at the store. Well,
Right,
while I
right.
was there, I saw a lot of people from India. I saw a lot of Muslims. And so we're buying food there. And as we were getting ready to pay, a Muslim woman, like in a full hijab, like fully, she taps me on the shoulder and she says, "Excuse me, are you Anthony?" And I'm like,
No
"Yes, I am."
way.
I kid you not, man. I've
That's
never seen this
cool.
person. I would have thought a Middle Eastern
Yeah.
store, who here would follow me? But she was
Right.
like, "Hey, I've been watching your stuff. Like, I really appreciate your commentary. Like, me and my husband love your work, et cetera, et cetera." And my
Wow.
cousin was kind of like stunned. He was like, "What the heck? Like, why would a Muslim?" And I'm just like, "Look, man, my reporting is not just about Christianity. It's not just
Sure.
about being right wing or being a Republican or being a conservative." And if you talk to a lot of people, I don't hide that I'm a conservative or that I'm a registered Republican,
For sure.
but I do think that there's honor in journalism and just reporting objectively. There's honor in that. You gotta remove these biases, because it has nothing really to do with what's being reported. I think that the moment you kind of interject your own philosophy or your own
That's
bias
where it goes
in what you
downhill.
are calling objective, then it
Hmm.
kind of taints the work. So yeah.
I think that's why it's so important to like know your why and know what's true to you and that foundation about truthfulness. That way, everybody can get the truth and make their own opinion on whatever fact that you provided them. Right?
Right.
Yeah. So speaking of facts and things like that, I want to get into real estate in a moment. But before we do that, I want to share a real estate statistic because it kind of gives everyone in the audience an understanding of how difficult things can be, right? For people living more so in Southern California. According to the OC Register, the annual income required for a typical California house has doubled over the last 5 years. And when it comes to Orange County, to qualify for a home that's just a little bit above average home price, um, you have to make $373,000 per year to
Ooh,
afford a $1.45 million house. That
that's
is
insane.
insane. So the average home price in Orange County is about 1.2. In Los Angeles, it's about 907,000 or so. But the fact that most people have to make at least 200,000 or more nowadays is just insane to me. What do you think about that?
No, yeah, I agree, man. And that is something that, you know, when I came back to California, because I was in the military for so
Hmm.
long, at the time when I left the military, I was already living in Massachusetts. And so my thinking was, I'm going to retire at 20, come back and buy a home. But
Hmm.
obviously, I left after 11 years in the military. I did not
Right.
retire from the military. I came back,
Uh,
and that was one of the things is that um, I noticed how expensive it was to live in California.
sure.
These are the things that you don't really think about, right? When you're prior to 18 years old, you live with mom, etc.
Yeah.
That's why, like,
Things are
even talking
good.
with, yeah, of course,
Yeah.
because everything's getting paid for.
Yeah.
And so it's things that you don't think about, but when you come back, like when I came back from the military and I came back to California, I noticed that homelessness had skyrocketed.
Hmm.
I noticed
Hmm.
that drug use was
Hmm.
just, oh, who cares? It
Right.
smells like marijuana everywhere because they legalized marijuana basically recreationally.
Hmm.
And it's legal to just shoot up anywhere apparently now. You can just pop up a tent. And so as an adult, you start looking at these things. And as a family man myself, just leaving the military, I
Hmm.
was thinking to myself, man, I can't wait to, buy a home for my family and I. And what I noticed was like you said, how expensive it was. And so I'm thinking to myself, is California even a place where I can raise a family? Is it a
Right.
place that I can even own a home? Now, back then in 2017, the rates were still pretty good.
Hmm.
And being a veteran, you and I have talked about this separately, but we do have the VA loan,
Right. Very
where they kind
helpful.
of give you better incentives, exactly. But to buy the current home that I'm at, that we bought in 2019 in northern Los Angeles County, we did get in under 3%, which I'm very blessed.
Yeah.
Which is
Very
also
good.
another reason why I'm like scared to sell to upgrade, is because it's
It's
like,
golden
oh my gosh,
handcuffs that you got right now.
yeah, yeah, it is. And so um, it's one of those things where it's scary, man, because if rates were still below 3%, and maybe
Yeah.
this is where you can kind of help me out. We kind of talked about this, right? We were
Hmm.
talking about like
Hmm.
what's the best option to do. But as someone that's not in real estate, and I'm sure there's a lot of listeners that can probably relate because you're the real estate guy. I'm just like the normal Hispanic guy trying to make it. I'm just trying to make it.
You're the cool
I don't know
journalist.
too much.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
just like the regular guy just trying to make sense of things.
Hmm.
It's either a scary time to buy or a scary time to sell because you don't
Hmm.
know what's going to happen. Nobody wants to buy when the national average is at 7%, for a loan,
Right.
and then come to find out that in a year, it's down to like 3 or 4%. You're going to be like, dang it,
Right.
but also like for myself, in the situation that I told you is I would like to sell so I can upgrade a bit, and then put some money in the bank, because of the equity that we've gained since 2019. But now we risk like, okay, well, what's our APR going to look like, right? Are we going to be stuck at 7%? And so, and talking to you and talking to some friends and talking to some family, one cousin kind of gave me the perspective that I was just talking to over the weekend was I would rather deal with like a mortgage where I'm paying very minimal with a low APR than try to get something a lot bigger that's going to cost a lot more and with a higher APR. It's about like
Right.
basically like pay as little as you can to live so
Hmm.
that you can invest that money in bigger other things. And so with me, it would just be my business, right? It would be like, how can I expand my business?
Sure.
Um, but
I
yeah,
think
man,
that's
it's no, go
it's
ahead.
it's it's, it's brutal. No, I think it's sad to see that it keeps getting harder and harder. I think we're going to get to a point. I mean, fortunately, home prices are staying up, and I think it'll probably continue that way, because of the supply issue. There's not enough supply. And I think eventually it'll become, though, the haves and the have-nots, the people that will never own. That's why we're seeing the average home buyer now is like 42 years old. It used to be closer to
Mm.
20s in the 80s. But the reason why I bring this up, even though we're a real estate, podcast and you're on here as a journalist, but I bring it up because we're all having to go. And by the way, let me backtrack. Congrats on owning a home, and the fact that you own a house is huge. So I
Yeah.
think you're doing just fine, no matter what you do, as long as you own a piece of property. All the listeners out there and those watching, just own a piece of property, and you'll be fine for the most part. Just own that property. But moving forward, though, everyone in California paying so much in taxes, you either own a home or you barely can afford a home, and you have to deal with all this homelessness. There was that 2024 study that just came out that showed, I think it was like $24 billion went without, with Newsom's leadership, without knowing where the actual cost went. Everything kind of like just disappeared where the cost went. What can you tell us about that? Because I think a lot of people need to hear about that.
Yeah, man, and this is where like the journalism and kind of like the real estate or audits kind of go into play, because it's really abysmal what's happening at the California state level. So there was a report that my good friend at Fox News she wrote. She's I think she's independent now, but she did a really good kind of like expose, basically saying where a lot of this money is going. And what you'll find is that Democrats or Gavin Newsom and his party of Democrats are in bed with a lot of these unions, a lot of these workers, the people that are basically in charge of and getting the deals, getting the contracts with the city that are being put in charge. If you take a look at the finances, it's like the saying goes, just follow the money. What you find is that not only are the people auditing in bed with the same politicians, but even
Hmm.
the people that were put in charge to basically quote unquote fix the homelessness problem are
Yeah.
also donors and business partners of these same Democratic politicians.
So
And
it's a
and look,
mafia.
yeah, it's basically what it is. And you might be listening and you're like, oh, here he is like bashing Democrats. But
Yeah.
the reality is that
A
the
little bit.
Democrats control the governor, they control the state senators, and they
Hmm.
control the state, basically the whole state
Assembly.
legislation,
Hmm.
the assembly, the Senate, and the governorship. Who
Right.
else can you blame?
No
Who
one
else can you
really.
blame, right? You can't blame anyone. And so to me, again, it's about speaking truth. It's not that I'm trying to Democrat bash. I'm just trying to give you guys exactly what's happening.
Hmm.
And so what ended up happening is you have these quote unquote nonprofit organizations, you have these government organizations that are being created by the cities in the state of California to hire people to tackle homelessness. Oh, we're gonna open up a committee. We're gonna launch this new committee to see where it is that we can help with homelessness. But the reality is that do blowing to $24 billion, homelessness has only gotten worse. And the
Yes,
reason
yes.
for it, is because, again, if you follow the money, you come to find out, okay, just put it into perspective. There are organizations that had over 100 employees. And when you take a look at how much these people are getting paid, the chief executive officers, the presidents, the board directors, whatever you want to call them, the people basically in charge of solving homelessness are getting paid upwards of 100 to $200,000 a
Crazy,
year,
dude.
in some cases
Crazy.
up to $300,000 a year, to solve homelessness. That could include benefits, that could
Right.
include stipends, that could include travel expenses paid, per diem, etc. Now ask yourself,
That's criminal, man.
if it's insane. And the thing is,
Considering I'm sorry to interrupt you, but homelessness
oh,
has
go ahead.
increased since 2013 to 2023 from a study I found 53%. And a
Yeah,
study from 2015 till now, it's gone up like over 60%. So like
yeah,
the
man.
fact that you can get paid all this money, like you're saying right now, and you still have a failure of a track record, and it continues, and then Gavin is out there continuing to give reason, that he's trying, right? But I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I had cut you off.
No,
Just
no,
wanted to
no.
say that.
That. But you're absolutely right, man. And here's the reality: is, so you have these people that have probably never made this kind of money in their lifetime,
Yeah,
and now they're
yeah.
getting paid $200,000 plus all these allowances by the government, guaranteed money,
Hmm.
if they help solve homelessness. Are you going to be one of those people, like, more than anything, people want security? That is why I stayed in the military for so long, because I'm like, look,
Hmm.
I have a family, I have kids. I want guaranteed security. I want to make sure that no matter what happens, if I get sick, if I break a bone,
Hmm.
if anything were to happen, I want guaranteed income every 2 weeks. And I get it. A lot of people live that way. I no longer live that way, and thankfully, I'm in a
Yeah.
spot now where, hopefully, if nothing were to happen, I've got some money put away. But it's really incumbent of me, because if
Hmm.
if I can't work for 6 months, I'm going to be in some serious trouble. But it's part of life, man. You got to be willing to take those risks. But getting back to what I was saying was, as far as security is, what person can really sit there and be like, I'm only going to take this job for 2 years, make
Nobody. Yeah.
$300,000 or 400 or 500, but it's my mission that in 2 years I no longer have a job because I want to solve homelessness. And the
No
reality
one with the
is
right
that,
mindset can think like that.
right, exactly. You're thinking, how can I keep this job forever?
Hmm.
Right? If you're making $200,000 a year, why would you want to go anywhere else?
And I
So
will
it's
say,
like,
200,000 is a lot of money. I mean, because I'm kind of like in your position. I don't have a guaranteed income, and when I make 200,000, it feels great. And
yeah,
and if it's a big difference, 200,000 from like, I don't know, anything under 60,000. So I could see why they don't want to let that go. But that is honestly criminal to say you're helping it, and then you just see it get worse, right? And you're just going into
right.
pockets. But
And
what's
and
the
here's a
reality though?
and here's the thing, though, is we can also dispute that homelessness is not going to be solved in 5 years or in 2 years, like I
Right.
proposed, right? Like,
Right.
oh, Anthony, are you really that naive to think that a board of directors or a committee is really going to solve homelessness in 2 years? It didn't take 2 years to create the problem. Why would you think that it's going to solve it? Sure, but you just mentioned something very important, and the important thing is that, so then why are these people keeping their job?
Yeah.
Why, if you hired someone to help run your company or to spearhead your company, and these people did not return profits, or these people didn't make a profit for
Mm-hmm.
you,
Mm-hmm.
or they didn't make a profit for your investors, whatever the case might be, or they didn't solve the problem in which you hired them to solve, why would you keep them on board?
Right.
Why
Right.
would you not fire them? So that's the problem, is that it's the same people. It's the same people there for over a decade that say, well, you know what the problem is? We need more money. That's the reality. We need higher taxes so
Right.
we can go ahead and knock out these problems. That's the reality. It's not us. It's not our fault. It's not my fault. I get paid $300,000 a year and I can't solve this problem. It's actually the taxpayers' fault because we need more money. That's the reality, and we need to create more incentives, and we need to create that. And it's a bad business model. I don't think any sane person that was distributing all this money out, but again, it's guaranteed money. These
Mhm.
people don't have to worry. You touch on something, like, oh, when I make 200,000, it feels great.
It's huge, dude.
It's an
Uh,
incentive though, right?
yeah,
Because now you're asking yourself, okay, I know I've done it. What do I need to do, or what do I replicate to
right.
make it happen again? And so you're gonna try to go back and be like, what steps did I take? And you're gonna look
Mhm.
back at sleepless nights, hard
Mhm. All the
work,
time.
taking risk, like maybe making that phone call to the person they told you not to contact, right? Like, hey man, this person doesn't like to be bothered. Don't bother them. You're like,
Yeah,
no, dude,
exactly.
I need to call and close this deal. People tell me like, hey, you got to be careful with people with money because you don't want to bug them and you don't want to.
Yeah.
But hey, you want. Hey, you know what? I'm not going to take that advice because then I'm never going to close this deal or whatever the case might be, right? And it's the same deal with me. Like I do social media marketing. I reach out to companies all the time. The best case scenario, I'm making more money a month. Worst case scenario, nothing happens. But
Right.
you never would find out, right? And so imagine you don't really have that incentive. That incentive is there for both of us because
Mhm.
we have to go out and seek these opportunities.
Correct.
That incentive is
Correct.
not there with these directors because they know they have a guaranteed job. Whether homelessness goes up or down, it doesn't matter because you can just create a whole new set of problems and a whole new set of solutions and be like, well, look, I've now pointed at where the wrongs are. We just need more money for the solutions. And then it's just like a perpetual cycle. And the thing is
And
that people are just
yeah,
going to continue to buy it, you know?
right. And our way of living, or in terms of how we make our career, it's a matter of results driven, right? So that's how we
Mhm.
make our income, as opposed to them, it's not. But what makes it even feel better when you make a certain amount of income is the constant effort you're putting in it. So it makes it even more special, and you appreciate it because not every time I hit that, I go low, I go up, I go low, I go up, as you were saying, like every month, it can change, but I think language is a very important weapon. When you're fighting homelessness, you're never going to beat homelessness. It's like saying you're never going to make someone not be poor. It's impossible,
Right.
unfortunately. So by them saying they're going to fight homelessness, it's a good weapon for them to basically say I am fighting, but obviously they're never going to solve it, right?
And also, just to be clear, like homelessness is not just about being poor. There's
Right.
actually very few cases in which a person is truly homeless
Drugs,
because they
yeah.
fall into hard times. Like, oh, you know what? I used to have a stable job and now I'm out in the streets. Usually, those people, what ends up happening is they go live in the streets for a couple months. They're on a wait list to go into some kind of shelter, and then they work their way up. They're like, look, I used to live lavishly. I lost that life. I can no longer afford it. I have $0 to my name. Sure, I'm gonna live in this tent or whatever the case, but I'm gonna work myself back up,
Right,
because
right.
the reality is there's so many different organizations and nonprofits. I mean, here, like for example, let's say you came up to me and you're like, Anthony, I've fallen into some hard times, and let's just say you weren't, married and like you didn't have anybody.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna let you live on the street, man. That's the
Thank you,
reality.
dude.
A
Yeah,
lot of these
yeah.
people have
Likewise.
have friends and family, and people could be sitting there and saying like, "Oh, what would you know? Well, I have a middle brother. I think I've told you this. I have a middle brother who is
Hmm.
homeless.
Hmm.
But it's not because he's poor. It's not because he's not able to work. It's because he chooses, in an addiction life, and that's the reality that we also need to face when we talk
Hmm.
about the
Hmm.
quote unquote homeless problem. It's not that we have no homes to put these people in, because there's a lot of different projects that our taxpayer money is funding to put these people
Sure.
up in rooms, in hotels, whatever the case might be, homeless shelters. So there is a lot of programs out there. It's just that people want to have to do it. And so I have this brother, that unfortunately wishes to stay out there. When I talk to him and I say, why don't you just come home? Like there's plenty of space.
Yeah.
Like you don't need
Sad.
to make $1 million. We just want to see you do better. You can stay here for free. You can eat our food. We just want to see you do better. Um, the reality is, and this is what he's told me is, but I don't get to do what I want here. You have rules. I have to wake up at a certain time. I have to be home by a certain time. I can't be out past a certain time. I can't come home high. I can't come home and do what I want to do. So I'm
Hmm.
not going to stay at your home. I'd rather be in the street where I can live and nobody tells me anything. So that's really what that community is mostly about. Again, I'm not
Hmm.
trying to generalize here,
Right, right.
but I haven't
That's
just
true.
talked to my brother. I've also talked to all the people in his community, because there's so many times, unfortunately, that I've had to go out there looking for my brother because we haven't heard from him sometimes. So I get to talk to people. I get to talk
Dang,
to
sorry
people
to hear
that
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like, kind of going super personal here, but
Yeah,
it's just,
yeah, no,
again, it's you have to know these things, because it's important to know.
hmm
And when people think of like homeless people, they're like, oh, it's just people that have gotten under bad times. Like, why are we ragging on them? They're already, down on their slumps, whatever. But you have to approach these realities, because otherwise, how are you going to solve these problems, right? So,
right. It's finding it's leading back to what you said. It's finding the core, the truth behind it, to be able
right.
to then actually do something and help. Um, Moving things on to reporting again, but on like the Palisades in Altadena and Palisades, Pacific Palisades. Has there been any story that you think has been overlooked as of recent or over the past couple months that may not have been, at the forefront as it should have been?
Yeah, I mean, one of the stories that I just recently covered that I feel like it hasn't really gotten a lot of traction is that the Los
hmm
Angeles Fire Department is going through huge turmoil right now, and a lot of uh
Oh, wow.
restructuring, in the sense that basically the union has been discovered that they've been stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from the firefighters union fees. You
Okay.
have a firefighters union that the president just got reprimanded. He has stepped down, and the national organization of firefighters union is actually suing a lot of the board of directors and a lot of these, including the presidents, because they have been misusing a lot of this money.
Dang. Yeah.
And what that highlights is that the corruption is everywhere. It's not just the
hmm
LA mayor that failed to do anything. It's also within the fire department itself, right? They just fired the fire department
Sure.
watch captain. And there's articles upon articles of things that they failed to do, things that they could have done, the reservoir that was depleted because it was supposed to be clean, but then they knew that this was a
Yep.
life endangering upcoming fire season. So why not make it a priority to fill up that
hmm
reservoir? There's reports of fire hydrants that didn't have any water or low water pressure.
Right.
And that's like another thing that kind of plays into homelessness. A lot of people don't know this, but a lot of homeless people tap into these fire hydrants for water. And so what ends up happening is the fire department has to go and check the pressure of these fire hydrants, but there was no money for it. There was no fire. There was no money for these fire captains to order the departments to go out and make sure that the fire hydrants have proper pressure and proper amount of water flowing through them, etc. And this is not just me saying this. This is written memos to the fire captain, to the city mayor, saying because you've cut our budget, we no longer have enough fire. We don't have money to hire more personnel. We don't
hmm
have money to go check out these hydrants. We don't have money to fill up reservoirs. We don't have all these things. And so there's a lot of negligence at the leadership level in LA City. And what baffles me the most, brother, this is just speaking from like a journalist, is that there's nobody talking about this. KTLA 5 is not talking about this. Fox LA, and these are all local news stations here. Nobody is talking about this. The only
About
thing
the
that was
unions, or just to clarify,
not the
which
unions, the
part?
leadership, like everything that went wrong with the recent fires, both at the Palisades, and all these things. And it's upsetting because there's a gold mine of corruption, not just in Los Angeles, but all throughout California, that if you were a proper and honest news organization that has millions of backing by donors and sponsors, you would never go broke. Every day you would break a new corruption case because of the amount of stuff that just never gets reported on. And
Yeah.
I do
Well,
my best with my small channels. I
mhm.
did post this over on X, formerly Twitter, where I was saying like, look, there was corruption. This fire captain or this union leader for the LAFD was siphoning money, and this guy just got fired, and now there's legal. I think like this is a huge story, a very big one,
Well,
and no, like no one's talking about it.
right. Well, to be a little bit fair though, too, I have heard, some of the things that you mentioned about, the water at the fire hydrants depleted, the reservoir was not even, together to actually help hold water. Things like that have been reported. But are you basically saying more so like, exposing the corruption more so? Is that what you're kind of hitting on the head?
Well, here's the thing is you've probably seen the reports that there was low water pressure, but what you will not see by these journalists is a follow-up. There will be no
Follow up.
investigation.
Got it.
There will be
Got it.
no asking the mayor, why did that happen? And we demand to know the answers. And there won't be a follow-up of, oh, well, this is what happened. This is, or sometimes it'll just be like, oh, we talked to some expert and they said that this is what they think. And that's the end of the story here, folks, like case closed. But there's no like investigative journalism left, and where you have these journalists that it's their job to investigate. They need to be, on the ground investigating what really happened here. We demand interviews so that there's transparency for all of the Los Angelinos or Californians to be able to see. And it's just not happening. You'll see the headline, like
Yeah.
the fire hydrants or not
Right.
enough fire personnel.
I think
But
there are
there's
some
no follow up.
follow-ups though, but I think because I know some journalists and I know they do some follow-ups, but I'm sure, as what you already know, is I'm sure when they try to do a follow-up, either to the mayor or someone in an office of some position,
Yeah, they're
will
turned
just
down.
they're turned down, or maybe
Yeah.
they'll go to the boss and the boss will say, "All right, let's move on to the next story because now we need to do something else or whatever."
Yeah.
But what you're saying is the follow-up that you're able to expose. So when you expose this corruption and your other fellow journalists, that you're like independent journalists, this mainly will go on the what, like social media. But my question is, are you seeing protests from Angelinos going after what's going on and like protesting there? Because I find it weird that I haven't seen really any protests, but when it comes to other things that are more of a social scenario, it's more of an outrage versus something like this that has to do with life a lot of the time, and infrastructure that affects everyone's life, and cost obviously too.
Yeah, and I mean, we can even go back and kind of circle back to like the cost of living. The cost of living doesn't have to be the way it is if people just
That's
demanded,
so true, dude.
more
Yeah.
transparency. One perfect example of this, we have some of the highest, if not the highest, gas prices in the entire nation. This Memorial Day, we will have the lowest national average of gasoline in
Nice.
I think I said I
Nationally.
think I saw it like in over 20 years for Memorial Day, right? But that's
Wow.
not going to happen in California. Why? Because we get taxed on top of taxes on top of taxes. The problem is that nobody cares. You're right. Like people only care when they're told to care, or they
Mm-hmm.
only care if their friends care, but they don't
Yeah.
care when it's like directly harming you. Why is it? And the thing is, we've become so normalized of
People
just
become programmed.
accepting it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like they read it, and then it's like you said, it might have been reported on, but then it's like, hey, let's get to the next thing. I'm upset that we are paying the highest gas prices in the nation. Like I work with legislators, I text legislators, and the problem is that we don't really have checks and balances in California. And what I mean by that is, ideally what you want in your state legislation is you want checks and balances. You have a governor that can potentially want to work with both sides. That's what a good governor would be doing. But the reality is that in the state Senate, you have an over two-thirds majority of Democrats in control. And in the state legislation in the assembly, you have
Right.
over a two-thirds majority of Democrats. Even if, because there are some bills that need to be presented where you need a simple majority, basically 50.1% or 51% of the legislators need to vote for something to pass it. Republicans don't have 51%.
In
They can
California, we don't
never
have
introduce.
51%.
We don't have 51% of
Wow.
Republicans in the legislature at all. We don't have it in the Senate, and we don't have it in the
Do
assembly.
you, do
So
you
what
know
this
where it
does,
roughly is? Is it like 20, 30 maybe percent, which is
oh
obviously still not enough.
yeah, it's 20% or lower, 20% or lower of the state
So we'll
legislature is
never get
Republican.
balance. Never.
I wouldn't say we can never get balance. We can never get balance as it stands right now. And here's the thing: is it doesn't matter whether you're Democrat or Republican. I I'm a registered Republican. I don't want to see a 99%, a 90% Republican legislature. I like checks and balances. I like that you must work with the other aisle in order to bring about
Right,
proper
right.
common sense legislation.
Mhm, mhm.
Like for example, the state Senate just voted 100-0. I think that's the first time I've ever seen every state senator just voted to abolish tax on tips. Every state senator. There wasn't a single person that said present, which just means I'm not voting. And there wasn't a single dissenting person. There was not a single senator on the left or the right that said, this is a stupid idea. I don't want to vote for it. 100-0. It passed unanimously.
And yeah, I never
I,
heard
I
that.
like that. I
That's
like
not. Is
that
this
there are checks and
nationally?
balances. This is at the federal level,
Yeah,
correct?
okay, okay.
Yeah.
So
But that's the thing is you can't have common sense when you don't have checks and balances. And so I tell people all the time, I'm like, look, man, I don't care that you're a Democrat or a Libertarian or Green Tea Party or Independent or Republican. Just help bring checks and balances. You have one party that controls the cost of living, the cost of mortgages, the cost of gas prices in California. Nothing's ever going to change unless you vote for checks and balances. Be a Democrat. That's fine. Believe in whatever you want to believe in. But the Democrat supermajority in California is making real estate hard, is making it unaffordable to buy a home, is making it unaffordable to have a gas powered car. It's forcing you to buy alternatives. It's forcing you into solar power. It's forcing you into these things. And you might be for those things. I have solar power. I have a Prius. Believe it or not, listeners. Yeah, I absolutely do.
I'm
And
surprised,
that's
man.
the
You should be
same.
driving a
And that's
truck.
just I mean, our alternative car for the family
Okay,
is an SUV.
I'm just
So
kidding. Got
checks and balances, right? You got to have one of each, one to
Yeah,
save the
yeah.
planet and the other, I guess, to destroy it. Just
That's
kidding, man.
funny. Um, okay, so I have one more thing to bring up with you before we get going. And I could probably do this all day, so I would love to have you back on. But
For sure, man.
I think in order to have check and balances, is what you were saying a little bit earlier, was essentially people need to be um, informed, aware, and do something about it, right? But there's always seems to be some type of ability for the person to not be focused, or they ignore it because of something else. And as much as I love baseball, and this is a real estate channel too, so it's real estate and baseball, because full count means pressure. So the pressure moments in business or whatever it is, real estate. I know that baseball and World Series, the World Cup, Super Bowl can distract a lot of us, especially men. What do you have to say about that?
Oh, man. I don't think we have enough time. No,
What's
look,
yeah.
so here's the thing is I get a lot of flack for this
Hmm.
on my social media. I've made the argument that if you're not making $100,000 a year, if you don't own
Okay.
a home, or can afford one, and especially if you are married with kids and you still don't own a home or aren't working towards a goal, you have
Wow. Wow.
no right, no right to be watching
Man.
any sports. You
Uh,
should be banned. It should be
wow.
illegal.
To watch.
Honest,
What about play sports as a kid? I mean, that's a little different, right?
very different. So all
Okay.
my kids
Good.
play sports, and we go
Just for
on Saturdays
clarity.
to go watch sports. It's yeah. A lot of people misinterpret what I say. A lot of the times I say it facetiously. It's kind of like, guys, obviously I wouldn't want to make it illegal, right?
Right, like a
But the
joke.
but the but the reality is that I think that our time is better spent focusing on working harder. I live in California. Okay, I have a nice home. I could sell it and I could easily move to Tennessee, to Texas, to one of these cheaper states where I pay less income, etc. But it's like I told you over lunch maybe a couple weeks ago. I'm just going to work harder. That's the reality. My mom came to California because she didn't like Mexico. There was no opportunity for her. She didn't see an opportunity for her children to own land, to have a dream of being more successful. So she came to California as a single mom. And she owns a home. I own a home. My siblings are on their way to owning a home. It's the American dream. And to me, things like sports, and it's funny because you told me like, oh, I'm into baseball. But I do argue this a lot with people is we need to set aside whether it's video game, especially as men. We need to
Video
decide
games
whether
too.
it's
Yeah.
video games,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's watching sports. And here's the thing is, there's a huge difference between like if me and you let's just say for the sake of work together, right? We're doing real estate, blah, blah, blah. We both just landed a great deal and we just closed on a deal. And you're like, hey man, you want to go to the bar to like, just get a drink and watch like the last couple innings of the Dodger game? I'd be like, sure, man, because we just got finished working, we accomplished something, and it's not like we're going, as fanatics. And I think that that's the problem. And I hate to say it, especially when I see it with the Latino community, is you have, and I've seen it where you have so many people spending thousands of dollars a year, thousands, without even thinking about it, on seats or season tickets or expensive beers or expensive hot dogs or food at these Dodger stadiums. The traffic getting there, the traffic getting back, the time spent, but you don't own a home and you don't make anywhere near $100,000. Why are you doing that? That makes no sense to me, man. Zero sense. And so
Fair point.
I say this on my social media again facetiously. I'm like, it should be illegal that if you do not make 100,000, because here's the reality, man, is we and you and I talked about this, especially Latino Hispanic community, is we need to do better, bro. Our parents didn't flee their country and come on everything and basically abandon everything they knew, including the language, to come to this country for the American dream, for their children and grandchildren to never own a home or work toward it as hard as they can. That time and money should be better invested to own a home, and look, I own a home and I make over 100 a year by the grace of God, in this economy in California,
It's tough,
dude,
man.
it's tough. Yeah. And
You're
guess
still
what? I still
young.
don't, by my own standards, I can
Yeah.
willfully go and watch a game because I achieved it. I've achieved. And here's the thing. Here's the
Right.
reality. I grew up on video games. I used to play video games all
Me
the
too,
time.
dude. Yeah.
All the time, bro.
Till I was
Fortnite,
like 15,
Call
I
of
think.
Duty,
Uh-huh.
etc. Oh no, I'm talking about like 2 years, 3 years ago.
Oh
I
shit.
was, I mean,
Oh
I
wow.
wasn't like playing like every day, you know what I mean? But I
Okay.
would hop on. I would like, hey, I just got off of work. Let me hop on with my cousins and we're all gonna play a couple of hours. And let me tell you,
Mm,
dude, before that day, before I quit video games, I never made over 100,000. I told myself,
there's an
I'm gonna
equation.
quit video games and I'm gonna reinvest that time and energy
Hmm.
into making a thing for myself. And actually, right on top of maybe this shelf right here, my
Yeah.
PS5 is up there
No.
collecting dust, bro.
Oh, good, dude. It's like
Because I'm
a
just
art piece now. The past.
yeah, it's just I look at it and I'm like, dude, I used to spend all this time. And look, again, I'm not saying never. You know what I'm saying? I'm not asking people to just be like, never watch a game,
Hmm. Hmm.
never play. But what I am asking people is, dude, spend your energy and your money in a better way to get yourself in a reality you don't wish to escape, because there's so
Right.
many people that live paycheck to paycheck. They
Hmm.
live with this and all they dream about is like, oh, one day I'll be able to like visit Italy. Oh, one day
Yeah.
you know what, man, I've built a reality for
Damn.
myself.
Yep.
I don't
Yep.
care to escape it. I love having business meetings. I love chasing the next deal, the next thing. I love life. I truly do, man. I have a wife, I have 3 kids, I have a home. Everything my mom set out for us to
Hmm.
accomplish, I've accomplished, and I'm hoping, and I'm sure she's very proud of that. She's like, this is exactly what I wanted. I wanted you guys to thrive. And
Right.
therefore I want it for my kids and my grandkids. So for years now, we haven't had cable TV. We
Wow.
allow our children to to play sports, but we don't allow them to watch it. we
Wow,
don't we don't
dude.
we don't
That's
have a
great.
family we don't have a family team. We don't have the matching jerseys. We don't have that. Have they gone to sporting events? Yes, I have
Good.
pictures of
Good.
me and my oldest at
That's a
Dodger
good
Stadium.
moment. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. Make a memory. Take your kid to whatever. But again, if you are so engaged in sports that you are kind of failing everywhere else, it's time to kind of
I
reevaluate, bro.
I will say I think that's where you and I get along, but it's also good for people that are listening, watching. It'll inspire them to put some standard to their life, and I'm sure there's more standards I can adopt for sure. I'm not obviously the top at all, but um, the standard you and I have in regards to sports, we have the same outlook for the most part because I think I had shared with you. I just started watching baseball again like 2.5 years ago and this was my life, man. I played it a little bit in college, then I watched it all the time. But for 10 years, I gave it up and said, I am never watching a game again until I make money. And
Yeah.
10 years, it took me 10 damn years though. That's a long time. But I was young. I
You
was
did it.
I was like a teenager. But anyways, man, this was a blessing to have you on. Thank you so much. The next time we have you on, there's going to be more good questions coming, and I think
For
you're
sure,
going to
brother.
enjoy it too. Where can people find you, and anything else you want to close with?
No, yeah, man. I will just say this: a lot of people get offended by what I say, and what I will say, especially because I kind of picked on my Hispanic and Latinos, is, dude, I just
Mhm.
want you to do better. It's not
Yeah,
that I'm like hounding you because you like a sports team or because you're a fan or because you take your family every week, whatever.
right.
I want you to own a home and I want you to make over 100,000. And what I'm saying is, if my mom that didn't even graduate middle school from Mexico as a single mom gave us this opportunity, and I was able to do it, and I have an associate's, but I'm not using my associates for what I do for my work. I didn't get an associate's in journalism. But if as an independent journalist, I'm making over 100 in California and I'm making it, I'm telling you,
That's
you absolutely can.
yeah.
So that's my final message is I'm not trying to crap on anyone. It's just I want you guys to succeed, especially if you're immigrant to the US. Story is similar to mine. I know we can. We have been built and designed to do so much more than just consume media, sports, etc. But where people can find me, you can find me on all socials as Informed with Anthony, and that's everywhere except for Twitter or now X. You can just find me under my name, Anthony Cabassa _ but if you just type in like Informed with Anthony on YouTube or on Instagram, you guys can find my content, and you can DM me that you hate my take on sports there.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to get the people going, and it's not
Yeah, man.
too hostile, right? But thank you so much, man. This was great. It was a lot of fun. Pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. Pleasure's mine.